What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my top 25 favorite films of all time list. This is a video that I've been very much so excited for, but also, truth be told, nervous to give you guys, because I know you guys have been asking in the comment section, but truth be told, I mean, it's something that's so subjective, something that's always changing. I mean, I've been working on this list for the past year. Obviously not every day, but it's something I'll go back to every now and then, and I'm like, all right, is it ready to go on YouTube? Is it? And then I just go back to it. I'm like, no, I need to edit it again. But I finally decided to put my foot down. In January of 2021, I'm giving it to you guys. So keep in mind, as I mentioned, it's always changing. A couple months from now, this might be a list that changed drastically, or something where one or two might have changed. And that's just part of like the rewatchability process. Sometimes I'll rewatch a movie and I'm like, you know what, this should be in my top 25, or you know what, no, it needs to go down a little bit now. So it's just something that's always changing. I personally have a top 100 favorite movies of all time list, so you can imagine how much that's changing compared to my top 25. But figured I would at least give you guys, meeting in the middle and give you guys top 25. So obviously, everyone's opinion is going to be different, as well as their view on these films. So keep it civil in the comment section. But all that exposition aside, let's get started, guys. Kicking off with 25 down to 1, with 1 being my favorite. So kicking off with 25, we have Once Upon a Time in America. This film is nearly 4 hours long, and it's a meditation on gangster life and just the repercussions of said life. I really like this movie, obviously. In fact, it's a film that really grows on me. The first and the second time I saw it, both were a different kind of experience. I think that Robert De Niro gives one of his best performances, and Sergio Leone, this is easily one of his best films. A masterpiece on all fronts. I have no issues with this movie whatsoever. It's a film that I'm definitely looking forward to watch a third time, but it just has so much of an impact on me. It was a very important film that I watched in, I believe it was winter of 2016 was the first time I saw it, and it just kind of stuck with me, and I finally rewatched it last year. It's great, man. It really is. If you haven't seen it, would highly recommend. That's why it's my number 25. Next up, number 24 is Spotlight. Yeah, Spotlight won Best Picture, but at the same time, I think it's very underrated. Not many people seem to talk about it. I think it's personally one of the best based on true story films. These kind of movies easily could be like stuffy, uninteresting, predictable. And obviously we know what happens, but it's the messages and the thematic material that I think really kind of hit home, as well as the pacing, dialogue, writing, characters. Everything just ties together, man. It really does. Even the cinematography, it's very drab, but it's intentionally so, because it doesn't have that focus on that. It's so that way you have more focus on the acting and the writing, in my personal viewpoint. It's not to say the cinematography is not great. It is. By no means is it bad. It's incredible, actually, because there's so much attention to detail, the way the camera's flowing. It's great. Howard Shore gives another great score. Overall, I think this movie's underrated, even though it did win Best Picture. Not many people seem to talk about this movie, and yeah, as you can tell, I love this film, man. Yeah, that's why it's my number 24. Next up, number 23 is The Tree of Life. So I actually own 2 copies of this movie. I owned the theatrical cut for a long time, and then a couple people mentioned the extended cut being even better, and I was like, alright, why not? I'll buy the Criterion on a sale. And I decided to buy that. I believe it was the July 2020 sale, and I'm very glad I did, because the extended cut is actually a lot better than the theatrical cut. And the theatrical cut is something that I saw several times, and I always liked it, really liked it actually, but I never loved it. I never fell in love with it the way a lot of people did. But after watching the extended cut, yeah, I did, man. That creation sequence alone is mind-blowing. All the other stuff is obviously amazing too, but it's definitely a film that I'm coming back to many more times, and I feel like with each passing year that I give it another go with watching it, I think I'll appreciate and respect it even more, pick up on even more things, because, from the time that I saw this as a 15-year-old to now, in the span of nearly 10 years, each viewing I pick up more and more things. So I can only imagine watching this as a 75-year-old man and being like, holy cow, I know the meaning of life even more now. But yeah, this is a masterpiece, and that's why it's up here. So yeah, that was my number 23. Next up, number 22 is Malkovich, and yeah, it's being John Malkovich, guys. This is one of my favorite comedies, as well as just, crying out loud, dramas. It's a movie that somehow balances comedy and drama, and so many comedies fail to do that, but this is a film that succeeds on all fronts. It's very odd, it's very bizarre, but if you are able to accept that, I think you'll really dig it. If you don't like strange and bizarre things, might not be your cup of tea, but it's definitely one of the most original and unpredictable movies I personally have ever seen, and the themes and messages definitely hit home. The rewatchability value is there, and the humor, it's on point. So yeah, being John Malkovich. So yeah, that was my my number 22. Next up, number 21 is Blade Runner, the final cut specifically. I've seen the other two cuts, and the other two cuts are good, but I think the final cut, it is the best and final version of what you should watch. In 4K specifically, this is a film that's a feast for the eyes, visually speaking. I love the score by Vangelis. They did a great job. Harrison Ford gives an incredible performance. Might be my favorite of his, honestly, and I love the ending. And honestly, watching the sequel makes the original even better. This is one of my favorite science fiction films, and it's not only one of the most influential films, but it's a film that, rewatching it many times, you gain more and more from it because it has a lot of visual storytelling, and it's for the better, honestly. I'm glad that they did away with the voiceover because, you know, voiceover, like anything, is a tool, but I just feel like for this specific film, it just wasn't needed. And yeah, Blade Runner, incredible film. So yeah, that was my number 21. Next up, number 20 is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, 2011 David Fincher version. This is a great film. I seem to go back to this movie once or twice a year. It's dark, it's depressing, it's a blockbuster that is so artful and so meticulous. It's got incredible visual effects. Not many people talk about it, but this movie has more CGI than a lot of huge blockbusters like Marvel films. It's got a great score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. The story's engaging. The 5-act structure of the script is really working to the film's advantage. David Fincher directed the heck out of this movie. Performances across the board are all amazing, specifically Rooney Mara. And the ending is haunting. You know, I know that they were planning to do like a sequel, like an actual sequel by David Fincher, but I'm kind of glad that they didn't because the ending is even more haunting knowing that there's not like another entry and that they just left it alone. It's a shame. But at the same time, it's for the better, because when you watch this movie 10 years later, you can see that this is a film that will hold the test of time. And it's a shame that not many people like it as much as, you know, you would think. I see on Letterboxd some people rate this like lower in terms of like Fincher's ranking list, but man, I gotta disagree. I think this is definitely one of his best films, and I honestly like it too, better than the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. But yeah, I love this film, man. That's why it's the number 20. So yeah, that's my number 20. Next up, my number 19 is Lincoln, which is one of my favorite biopic films. Daniel Day-Lewis kills it. The rest of the cast is great. Filmmaking is on point. Technical aspects in specific are off the charts. Rewatchability value, yeah, you betcha. This film was one of the films that changed my view on filmmaking because I never really looked at filmmaking. I never really looked at cinematography specific, but after watching this film for the first time in November of 2012, I did, because I'll never forget I first recognized that Daniel Day-Lewis, like whenever he was talking, you know, and having one of those speeches, you would have the camera slowly dolly in on him, like slowly, and then the conversation would end, and then when it would end, that's when the camera would stop and it would cut to another character. It's just something I noticed, and it was one of the films where I started really paying attention to camera angles, you know, with the lighting and everything. And especially the lighting of Lincoln. I mean, Lincoln also is a film where it's dark throughout the movie in terms of the cinematography, the lighting and everything. But then you look at when, spoiler alert, the 13th Amendment is passed, you then have a moment where it's then very bright. The lighting then goes from dark to very bright. And it's just like a little detail like that that I think is very important for me personally as a 16-year-old watching the movie when I did. Again, it holds up upon multiple viewings. I always come back to this movie and I love it, man. It's one of Daniel Day-Lewis's finest performances, and yeah, I gotta be honest, I love this film. You know, screw it. So yeah, that's my number 19. Next up, number 18 is The Thin Red Line. This is my favorite war film, probably. You know, specifically the art form of warfare. Because there are other, you know, like Lincoln would be considered like a war film, I believe, because it does deal with it. You know, obviously not on the battlefield, off the battlefield, but this is probably my favorite on the battlefield film. Because it's a meditation. It's a meditation on violence and what it does to human beings and nature. That first act specifically focuses on what violence and what war in general does to nature. And it's horrifying to say the least. But this is also a film that at almost 3 hours, it never bogs down. The pacing is always on point, and I like this a little bit better than The Tree of Life. I think this is Terrence Malick's finest film, and I would highly recommend you watch it. It's not for everyone, but you know, if you are into film and you do appreciate great filmmaking, this is definitely one of the films to watch. So yeah, that was my Excuse me, that was my number 18. Next up, number 17 is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This is a great film, a perfect balance of comedy and drama, and one of the finest films from the 70s, as well as just in general. I would highly recommend you watch this movie, especially knowing the fact that it was a film that really was a timely matter, because it's a movie that was dealing with that time period, this late 60s and 70s, where, you know, teenagers and just, you know, people in college going through against the grain of, like, you know, authority and everything. And it's something that is more timely than ever, I would say, in 2021, which is impressive. You know, a film that ages like a fine wine. Who could ask for anything better? But yeah, that's my number 17. Next up, number 16 is A Clockwork Orange. I wish that the transfer for Blu-ray would be better, because I do know that this is a great looking film in terms of cinematography, but I just don't think it's had the best transfer yet. I'm hoping that this gets a 4K release, I really am, but as it stands, this is a movie with incredible production design, one of the best soundtracks you'll ever hear, one of the finest performances you'll ever see, and an ending that is so artful that it pretty much transcends and inspires so many other movies and TV shows that have it where a character essentially begins one way and they end up reverting back to their old ways. I don't know, it's something that's really compelling, and I feel like before 1971 wasn't really something that got much focus on. So props to Stanley Kubrick. This is an incredible film, and obviously one of my all-time favorites. But yeah, that's my number 16. Next up, number 15 is Once Upon a Time in the West. This is an incredible film, man. Henry Fonda kills it as the villain, Frank. I love the characters in this movie. I love how, you know, you're dealing with these four individuals, and how these four individuals, their lives are interwoven in one which way or another, as well as their arcs. Their arcs are very satisfying. The gun battles that do occur in this movie are very meticulous, very slow but methodical in its approach. And that's the other thing. Just like Once Upon a Time in America, it's a film that is dealing with meditation. Instead of focusing on gangsters, this is a film that's focused on, you know, gunslingers and their matter of how they're dealing with things, and also just the changing of time. I love The Lone Ranger, and this is a film that very much so has a lot of influence that gave to that movie, because this is a film that, I'm not going to lie, I saw this movie, I believe it was July 2nd of 2013. That was my first time. And I saw The Lone Ranger for the first time July 3rd. Of 2013 in theaters. So it's just kind of ironic that I was just watching Lone Ranger in theaters, and I was like, this is just like Once Upon a Time in the West. So it was just kind of hilarious, like, you know, on a side note. But I love this film. It's a film that works on every single level. I have no qualms with this movie whatsoever. And yeah, that's why it's higher up on the list. But yeah, that was my number 15. Next up, number 14 is The Shining. Love this film. This is one of the finest horror films you'll ever see. Some of the finest cinematography, and just similar to Clockwork Orange, this is a film that is perfect on all fronts in terms of the craftsmanship. The rewatchability value is also there. I like this a bit more than Clockwork Orange. As I said in my ranking of Stanley Kubrick's films, his three main films that I gave in my top three, the placement of those three are always changing, because I always feel like it's hard. It's like picking your favorite child. It's like, you can't do that, you know? But I love The Shining. Dr. Sleep is the sequel, and I think that Dr. Sleep is also really good, but it doesn't match the suspense, the thrills, the chills of The Shining. And that just goes to, again, the testimony of Stanley Kubrick. He is an incredible filmmaker, and this is definitely a film to behold. So yeah, that is why it is, excuse me, my number 14. Next up, my number 13 is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. This is probably my favorite Western. It beats out Once Upon a Time in the West a little bit. The reason why I say that is because the entertainment value is a little bit higher for me with this movie than Once Upon a Time in the West. In terms of blockbuster, this is my favorite Western blockbuster. My favorite art house Western film is probably Once Upon a Time in the West. But again, the entertainment value is a bit more of this film, and I just get a little bit more out of it, because I look at this is like a companion piece. This came out first, but I feel like if you watch this and then Once Upon a Time in the West, it's interesting, because this, I don't want to say glorifies it, but it puts in perspective war, because it blends war and the Western genre, and it puts in perspective those two genres. But then I feel like Once Upon a Time in the West shatters it, but this is what sets it up, in my opinion. And also, everything I like about, you know, the genres of Western and war gets focused on in this movie. But I don't know. Everything about it works. I love the three main characters and how their stories are interwoven. as well as that final gun battle. My goodness, the suspense, the score by Ennio Morricone, it's awesome. Yes, if you haven't seen it, highly recommend you check it out. But yeah, it's my number 13. Next up, my number 12 is The Social Network. I love this film. This is one of my favorite films of all time, obviously, but you know, similar to The Girl Drank Dead 2, I can watch this movie anytime. Any point of time, I can watch this movie. It gets better each viewing. The meticulous nature of David Fincher is on display. Craftsmanship on point. Rewatchability value on point. Messages and themes gets me every single time. Absolutely love this movie. And I don't care what people say. If you go into this movie thinking that it's going to be boring, you're going to be in for a surprise when you see that it is actually one of the most entertaining, meticulously crafted films ever. Not even kidding. Adore this film. Respect. Respect David Fincher. But yeah, that's my number 12. Next up, my number 11 is Pan's Labyrinth, which is probably my favorite fantasy film. But much the same way of a lot of these other movies, it blends genres seamlessly. Because not only is it a fantasy film, but it's also a war film. And the fantasy and war elements blend together seamlessly. They somehow manage to balance those two tones. Also, the ending. The ending is very emotional, but more importantly, those costumes, man. The costumes, the makeup, the score, everything about this film works. I love it. And that's why it's that's why it's my number 11. Next up, my number 10 is a film that when I first saw it, it didn't even make my top 10 list of 2016, but lo and behold, it's not only my favorite film of 2016, but obviously, as you can see, one of my all-time favorite films now upon multiple rewatches, and my number 10 is Moonlight. I love this film, man. I really do, and I can't believe that I didn't like it as much the first time. I think it might have been because I was tired, because every single watch after that, it's gotten better and better and better. I think this is one of the finest LGBTQ movies, as well as just in general coming-of-age dramas. Everything works, man. It's a great film. The ending is haunting. I think every single time, you can't help but get emotional with everything that's going on. Again, filmmaking is on point. Entertainment value, I beg to differ with saying that like it's entertaining per se, but it's a film that I definitely am able to say like, you know what, I find it interesting every time. That's for sure. But yeah, Moonlight, it's my number 10. I also wanted to mention 4K. 4K is the way to watch it, man. It really is. But yeah, it's my number 10. Next up, my number 9 is The Silence of the Lambs. Yep, it wouldn't be a list without Silence of the Lambs. Some of the best editing in film history, right here. One of the finest female performances in film history, right here. One of the finest scores, Howard Shore's, right here. And then also one of the finest villains of all time, Anthony Hopkins, Hannibal Lecter, right here. The TV show Hannibal is also something that is great. I love Hannibal, but the film is the one that started all. Obviously, Manhunter came out. The Michael Mann film. I believe it was like 6-7 years before this one, but this is a film that's much better in my opinion, and honestly is so influential. And every single time, again, like these other films, every single time I watch it, I find myself noticing small details that I didn't notice before. It's awesome. It really is a great, chilling, psychological thriller of a film that also blends horror very well. Yeah, that's why it's my number 9. Next up, my number 8 is The Godfather. I love The Godfather Part 2 as well. I still need to watch Part 3, but Part 1 will always be my favorite of the bunch, I think. Part 2 is close, but the first one is something that manages to be a game changer of a film. It managed to somehow blend family drama with gangster films and crime films. That's a pretty big accomplishment if you ask me. And this film somehow managed to do that. You also really care about the characters, what they're going through. Also has incredible editing similar to Silence of the Lambs. Crosscut editing is utilized and it works very well. It's a final product that is art. That's all there is to say. And yeah, it goes without saying, one of my all-time favorites, number 8. Next up, number 7 is The Grand Budapest Hotel. This is like watching a cake, a beautiful wedding cake on screen. This is a film to behold. Some of the finest production design, costume design, comedic performances, humor, pacing, ending, everything works in this film. I love it. My favorite Wes Anderson film, and yeah, there's nothing bad to say about this movie. I've never once seen this film and said, yeah, they should have done that, or oh, it could have been cut down a little bit. Not once. One of the finest films of all time. yeah, that's my number 7. Next up, my number 6 is 2001: A Space Odyssey, which as of right now is the finest 4K that I've ever seen on my TV. This film is beautiful, man. I can't believe it when I first saw this movie that I thought it was just solid, and I skipped through some of it, to be honest, completely. But with each coming year, similar to like Tree of Life and Moonlight, I seem to come back to it more and more. And with each passing viewing, I seem to love it more and more. Recently, when I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, like a year ago, I was like, yeah, this is one of my all-time favorite films. I've noticed the pacing gets better and better with each viewing, too. More and more so, I'm able to get immersed into this world. And let me tell you, I think that this film also has a lot to say in terms of the art of visual storytelling and the importance of it, because it's visually outstanding. It holds up very well. It's got, honestly, some of the best visual effects ever made. It's outstanding, and how they were able to pull it off is anyone's guess. I mean, obviously I know how they did, but it's incredible, man. It really is. It's a feat for the eyes, and honestly, if you haven't seen it for some reason, what are you doing, man? You should really check it out. That's why it's my number 6. Next up, my number 5 is a film that goes against the grain. It's not really rewatchable in terms of like it's hard material to deal with, but it's definitely a film that I do come back to every couple years. And yeah, my number 5 is Schindler's List. Let me tell you, this is also one of the most emotional films I think I've ever seen. Every single time I watch it, I seem to somehow get more and more emotional with each passing viewing. And I think that has a lot to do with the raw realism that Spielberg is able to just spew on screen. Black and white was also a great choice in terms of cinematography. Acting is across the board amazing. Liam Neeson gives his best performance ever. I don't think there will ever be a performance of his that will ever be able to match the rawness of his performance, especially the ending with the factory scene. It's great, man. This is a film that gets everything right. It is filmmaking at its finest. It's long, but my goodness, that's not the reason why you don't rewatch it a lot. The reason is it's hard to watch, but when you do watch it, you're like, you know what? I'm glad I watched that again because it's incredible. Again, hard to watch, but a necessity to view. And yeah, that's my number 5. Next up, number 4 is the opposite of Schindler's List, where it is dealing with very intense themes and everything, but that being said, my number 4 is one of the most rewatchable films of myself, and that is Gone Girl. Yep, my favorite David Fincher film manages to also be in my top 5 films of all time. I love this film, man. This was also one of the films that changed me as a viewer. This was obviously 2014 when it came out, but it changed me, man, because it was a film where I had a very visceral reaction to. Not obviously in like a good way. It was more of like an incel kind of way where I was like, oh, women are like this, which is obviously not something that you should be thinking. And obviously in 6 years later, I've realized that it's a very even-handed movie. It's a movie that is handling both sides with care. It's showing both perspectives as well as the rights and wrongs, as well as giving you as a viewer of figuring out who's in the right. Because that's the thing about certain movies. Some movies have it as black and white, but Fincher's films are always painted in gray. And I think that's important to notate, that me as a viewer, I believe I was like 18 when I saw this for the first time, I looked at it as a black and white viewpoint. And because of that, I looked at it as this character being good, this character bad. Instead of thinking about it, you know what, both of these characters have flaws, and that, you know what, these flaws are enhanced by all these twists and turns, and these events really kind of mold these characters into what they are by the last scene. As well as that leads me to the ending. I love the storybook ending, how the beginning scene and the ending scene match each other perfectly. It's incredible to watch. This is Fincher at his best. He is incredible. He is definitely someone that is my favorite filmmaker as of the making of this video, and this is definitely an example as to why. Everything about him, he gets right. I love Gone Girl, and that's why it is my number 4. Next up, number 3 is I Drink Your Milkshake. I Drink Up. My number 3 is There Will Be Blood. Paul Thomas Anderson is a filmmaker that is up there. He's probably top 5 for me in terms of all-time filmmakers, but I feel ashamed for only having one of his films in my top 25, but bear in mind The Master and Boogie Nights are right outside top 25 for me. Magnolia is top 100 as well, but keep that in mind. He is not a filmmaker where it's like he only has one film of his in my top 100. He has a lot. And I have to say, There Will Be Blood is his finest film because His early work is great, don't get me wrong, I love his early work, but they're very fast-paced, they're very, like, in your face with the cinematography and, you know, the soundtracks, but this is a film that's not in your face. It's very meticulous, it's very, I don't want to say drawn out, but it's very much so a film that is based on visual storytelling. It's a film that doesn't have too much dialogue. It's definitely a film that is more meditation-esque than like a film such as like Boogie Nights, which I love, but Boogie Nights is all about the fast pacing, which is obviously perfect for that movie's tone, but I think There Will Be Blood is a film that definitely is a focal point of Paul Thomas Anderson, because when you watch his movies before this, they're a lot different than they were post There Will Be Blood, like The Master, Phantom Thread, Inherent Vice. It's a lot different. And I'm not saying that that's why it's in my top 3. I'm saying because I was able to not only recognize that, but I was also able to recognize the incredible, meticulous nature of everything. And you also have, in my opinion, probably the finest performance in film, and that's Daniel Day-Lewis as Daniel Plainview. He gives also one of my favorite lines of all time, if not my favorite, "I drink your milkshake, I drink it up." So there's just a lot to like. I also just love the themes, the American dream, and how the deconstruction of it, and how it's very flawed. It's a lot of issues that are with the American dream, especially during that time period, and how not much has changed 100 years later. So I don't know, it's just something that I'm able to really kind of hone into. And again, like all these other movies, rewatchability value is definitely up there. And with each passing viewing, I love it more and more. And that's why it's my number 3. Next up, number 2 is Mulholland Drive. Again, similar to Paul Thomas Anderson, I feel ashamed for only having one David Lynch film in my top 25. But again, just like Paul Thomas Anderson, I have several of his other movies in my top 100 films of all time. I have Eraserhead, I believe, in top 100. I definitely have Blue Velvet. Lost Highway is also probably on the outside of that. So he has other movies, don't get me wrong. But, you know, this is his masterpiece, in my opinion. His movie that I think his other movies that he's had a couple other masterpieces, but this is his movie that I don't see him being able to beat anytime soon. I think Twin Peaks: The Return might match it, but I don't know, man. This is a film that was way ahead of its time. I think, if anything, it gets better and better with each passing year, because it's something that it's considered a modern classic at this point. But it's a film that you're able to analyze. In each viewing, you're able to take something home that was a little bit different. It's got some of the best score, soundtrack, balancing, in my opinion. Acting across the board is great. It also is a great representation, in terms of like characters. Characters in general are very well rendered, and at the same time, three-dimensional. And their arcs very satisfying, to say the least. And the ending is heartbreaking, haunting, and kind of scary, to be honest. But yeah, I love Mulholland Drive, man. It's a fantastic film. That's why it's my number 2. My number 1 is a film that perfectly balances comedy and drama, and at the same time deals with midlife crisis, existentialism, and dealing with powerful gut-punching twists in an effective way, in a great manner, and that is American Beauty. Yeah, I'm hoping American Beauty gets a 4K release. Probably won't, because of the whole Kevin Spacey thing, but this is art, man. This is art. This is a film that, again, as I already mentioned, balances comedy and drama in such an effective way. There are a lot of moments where I am dying of laughter, but when it gears towards drama, I just feel like it's a transcending experience. I've had a lot of transcending experiences with these other 24 movies that I mentioned, but American Beauty, it's more so. It's more so a movie that I feel like an old man watching it, because obviously it's someone dealing with a midlife crisis, but I feel like I'm able to relate to these characters and what they're going through. I know that a lot of people are like, they're hateable and everything, but that's kind of the point. That's kind of the point, that all these people are trying to follow the American dream, and they're just like not happy in the slightest. Versus you have this gay couple that are kind of like off to the side, and they're very happy. And they're happy because they are content with what they have. They're not seeking out other things to then, obviously, self-destruction. They are content with what they have. And it's something that's always kind of dawned on me. And I'll never forget when I took film class, and I said that when we were analyzing American Beauty, and the teacher was like, yeah, that's actually a good point. I think about that. Because it's something that just kind of dawned on me, that you have all these characters that just aren't happy with their lives. They all are trying to better themselves. But then you see this couple, and they don't need to do that. And it's really something that I find intriguing every single time I watch it, as well as just the other messages and themes just really make me think. And it's a meditation, again, on just the emptiness of the suburban life. And as someone that lives in the suburbs, it hits me even harder with that. And the twist is something I always think about, because it's something that it's there, and it's something that definitely I can see people saying like, oh, I saw it coming, but even so, it's something that is so enriched in character development that you can't help but sit back and say, yeah, that's pretty impressive, man. It really is. But yeah, so American Beauty is my number one. Guys, thank you very much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. What's your top 25 or even top 10 or top 50? I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. If you guys want to hear my, other, obviously 26 to 50 and then like, obviously 50 to 51 to 75 and then 76 to 100 in terms of like my top 100, let me know in the comment section down below because, if there's enough people that say it in the comment section, who knows, maybe I'll give you guys my 26 to 50 next and so on. But anyways, guys, you're the best. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscription, notification bell, and I'll catch you guys later.